Hey, what's going on, you guys? Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to do a general repair of an electrical wiring harness. This information is super useful because everything we use today is electrically powered. Even your car has electrical components, and if any of those wires short out, it can be dangerous and can lead to a fire, or things may not work properly. So right here I have an electrical harness. As you can see, one wire is a little bit too short. I also have another wire that I will be putting a terminal on and inserting into this connector. And I'll also show you how to move wires around in the connector, so if something is pinned incorrectly, you can fix it. So before we get started, we should go over a tool list and some materials. So here I have a pair of scissors just for cutting wire, typical scissor stuff. Here I have a very, shall I say, ornate pair of wire strippers. You can buy any kind of wire strippers you like, Harbor Freight, whatever. I have a terminal crimper. It's important to know what kind of crimp you will need for your terminals, because if you crimp it incorrectly, you'll get poor conductivity and the wire won't work. And we have two picks. They're lightly filed down to make it easier to get into the connectors and move terminals around. These are by far the hardest tool to find. You need to have a right sized pick. It doesn't have to necessarily be these ones, but these Delphi brand work very nicely. And lastly, we have a portable soldering unit and some solder. You use this to solder wire to the terminal, and it creates a stronger connection and the wire is less likely to break. So now on to the fun stuff. So to start, I suppose I'll start with inserting a new wire. So in order to insert a new wire, you obviously have to get your wire, straighten it out nice and pretty. Take your wire strippers. This is 16 gauge wire, so I would put the 16 gauge in, strip it, boom. You have about 5 millimeters of copper exposed, and it'll make more sense how much copper you need when you get the terminal out. This connector requires seals in the back for the wires. This helps increase water resistance. Most things aren't really waterproof, but if it got rained on, it would protect the connection, but I wouldn't drive into a lake. So you wiggle the seal on, get it all past the copper, nice and pretty. You grab your terminal off this. This is a little more detail oriented, so I'll bring it up closer for everyone to see. So on this wire, or on this terminal I should say, you have, I guess, two crimps. You have a crimp right here in the front and a crimp here in the back. What you do with your wire is you get the copper to go just a little bit past the second crimp, and you want to make sure the seal is past the first crimp on the bottom. And so then on my crimpers, I use the smallest setting for the front. Give it a nice squeeze. You don't need to crank on it. And then I give a second smallest for the back. Give it a light squeeze. Definitely don't crank on that one so you don't rip the seal. And now it's important to solder the terminal to make sure it's okay and it stays okay. So we turn our soldering unit on. Make sure you wear safety glasses. I'm a professional. I've been doing this for 4 years, so I forego some safety measures sometimes, but wait for it to get warm. It takes a minute. Put a little solder right on the tip to get it hot and to test it. It's not melting yet, so we got a little warmer to go. When the solder melts on the tip, you know it's ready and hot enough. Gotta get a little bit of solder going. Try not to breathe the fumes in, it's kind of inevitable, but little solder. If it came out. Boom. And then flick this off for safety. And bring it back in for the fans to see. You have a nice wire. Notice you can't see any of the copper, it's all silver. You don't want to put too much solder in, because if you put too much solder in, it'll block it up and it won't catch in the connector. So put it in, find the cavity. I'm going to put this in cavity 5 because that's the empty one I have in this row. And we slide it in. It should slide right in. If it doesn't, that means you might need to adjust your crimp. Make sure your terminal's straight. Sometimes a little pressure, but if it's generally too hard, okay. I actually made a mistake. You actually have to unlock the connector. So on the side here, there's tabs and these two little grooves, if you can see. And then pretty much have to push a little bit, wiggle on both sides a little bit. Keep pushing, keep pushing. That was, the connector was fully engaged, so none of the terminals were able to move. Boom. So I unlocked it, pulled this out, and now you have the inner part of the connector. And so you make sure the terminal's facing up. The lock tabs come right in this little groove right here. You have the little grooves, so you make sure your terminal's facing up to where the grooves are, and it should slide right in. My fingers. Are a little drier. So you slide it in, and then it works. Straighten out the terminal. Sometimes it gives you a little fuss. Make sure it's nice and snug. Little light push. You'll hear a small click when it's inserted all the way, like that. And then if you want to move a terminal, you come up, and then in the camera, hopefully it's not too hard to see, there's little tabs on the terminals that hook on this bar right here down the middle. So if you'd like to pull one out, you would push down on the tab and give the wire a nice little pull, and the wire comes right out. Now, to extend a wire, the short wire, obviously, there's not enough room on the end to get it, so we'll need to extend it. So we can start by undoing the tape. Give it a nice little untape. I'm going to pull the wire up and around and out. So we'll just say we don't have an extra terminal. I do, but we'll just say we don't. So we need to keep this terminal intact for as much as possible. So what we do is we cut at least 50 millimeters back. If you go over 100, it'd probably be better. So I'm gonna cut back as far as possible without being silly. And so then I'll cut back a little bit more. Cut this bit off. We'll grab our spare wire that we were just using. It's more than long enough, so we can cut a little bit off the end here and use it to extend our wire. Cut a piece off. Reach in your trusty toolbox. I keep on the side, and you pull out a piece of heat shrink to make sure your connection is water resistant, and you pull out splice clips. So you need both of these to make sure your extension stays solid on your wire and it doesn't break. So we'll start by taking our wire harness, and we take that piece we just cut off the terminal, so we know the wire has to go into the terminal, or the connector, so it'll lose length. So you make sure you insert it in, so you know where your length is, you see exactly how short you are per se. Got a little gap, maybe 4 inches. And you start, and you strip your wire. Another 16. Nice, you open up your splice clips. Boom. This is where some hand-eye coordination is necessary. Gotta hold multiple things and do multiple things. This wire is a little bit smaller, so we strip it. 18, it's like 22. So in order to extend this, we grab our heat shrink, make sure you put that on, because if you forget, you're probably gonna have to redo it. Slide it on the end of the wire. Grab a handy splice clip. Insert your wire in. It's okay if some copper comes through to the other side. It's all gonna be covered up anyway. You put your other wire in and you try and hold them both with one hand. Get your crimpers. I use 3rd smallest size to start. Then I go down to the 2nd smallest to tighten it up. Nice and pretty. Boom, bada boom. Also important to make sure you solder these as well, but since we're not done, we will come in here and we'll finish up. So you hold the wire up to the other wire. So you see how short you are. You can make it a little bowed so you have a little bit of extra slack, but you just got to make sure they overlap a little bit. So we'll say right there is where we'll cut our extra wire. So it overlaps. Boom. Slip a piece of heat shrink on both sides. Strip the wires one more time. 16. Boom. 20 gauge, but don't drop it. Boom. Double check, make sure the heat shrink's on. It is. We got 2 pieces on for our 2 splices. Grab a splice clip. Put it on the 1st wire. Get the 2nd wire. Made them up. Don't let the splice clip twist in the crimpers, because if it twists in the crimpers, you'll get a bad crimp on it and it won't be good. So, nice from connections, give them a light pull, make sure they don't pull out. Close up your stuff, because if you spill those, that will be a bad day for you. Then we're going to turn our soldering unit on one more time, get it warm. We're going to solder up these 2 connections and we'll heat shrink them up, and then our harness will be complete. So wait, get our solder ready. You want to try and solder the connection as straight as possible. It may involve leaning the unit on your harness. You just keep the hot end away, but you don't want to solder with a bent connection, or else it'll be soldered bent and it'll look not great. So we need to see if we're warm. Yep, we've got some warmth. Make sure nice and soldered. You just want to make sure none of the copper is showing. Looks fresh. Slide the heat shrink down. Oop, I got a little solder spike. Hold it up, make sure that solder spike comes off a little bit. Put this back down. Slide it down over there. Oop, that's the wrong piece of string. Slide this string down up over that, like that. Then we get the second one. Again, make sure you're being extra careful. Make sure it gets goobered up nice. Clip your unit off for safety. And then cover it back up nice. So in order to finish off, you grab a little torch with nothing in it. So I have an attachment on this, so I unscrew this even though it's hot. Back into its container. And then this attachment on. It's got a little hook to it to wrap around. Now this will get nice and hot. It's open now, so gotta be extra careful, keep your face away. Let it get warm. Shrinks up nice. Nice. Make sure we have both of them. Turn that off again. And then there's our harness. It's there's a little bit of slack, but that comes with wire repairs. So what I usually do is I usually find a nice place to give it a nice gentle loop, wrap the wire a little bit, and then grab a piece of your tape, try and make it hold pretty, and then just put a piece of tape right there. There's your little loop. You don't want it to be too tight, but it works just the same. And then there's your wire. We'll put a third piece of tape up here for looks. And then make sure these are closed. You slide this back into the connector, this side. And so if it's you give it a little squeeze, then you'll hear another pleasant little click for your reward. And that's your harness.